A black man was struggling under $47,000 in debt to keep his late mother's restaurant alive, despite having his power and water cut off, being threatened, and watching his customers disappear day by day. He still insisted on giving a filthy, hungry homeless man a free meal. But at his most desperate moment, when the police arrived with an eviction order and thugs dragged him out the door, that old beggar suddenly stood up and stopped everything. With a single wave of his hand, 5 black SUVs appeared out of nowhere and surrounded the street, turning the tables completely. The rain had been falling on Baltimore for 3 days straight. On the corner of Monroe Street, in the poorest neighborhood of the city, a neon sign flickered weakly in the gray afternoon light. Washington's Kitchen. Half the letters had gone dark years ago. Water dripped from 2 spots in the ceiling into buckets that Samuel had learned to place just right. Inside Samuel Washington, the black owner of the restaurant stood behind the counter, slowly wiping a plate that was already clean. It was what he did when his mind wouldn't stop racing. The restaurant was empty except for the sound of rain against the windows and the old refrigerator humming its tired song. 6 tables, 12 chairs, and not a single customer. It had been like this for weeks now. On the wall behind him hung a black and white photograph of Rosa Washington, his mother, the woman who had built this place with her own 2 hands 40 years ago. She was smiling in the picture, standing in front of this very counter on opening day, her apron still white and crisp. Samuel remembered that day. He had been 18 years old, helping her hang that same sign outside. He looked up at her face and whispered, "I'm still here, Mama. I'm still keeping it going. I promised you." The words felt hollow today. Promises were easy to make. Keeping them was something else entirely. He set down the plate and opened the drawer beneath the cash register. A stack of overdue bills stared back at him, all marked with red letters demanding immediate payment. He didn't need to count them again. He had memorized every number. Electric company wanted $800, water was $450, and the rent 6 months of it came to $38,000, $47,000 in total, a mountain he could never climb. Samuel closed the drawer and leaned against the counter. His back ached from standing all day, even though there was nothing to do. His hands, rough and calloused from 30 years of cooking, gripped the edge of the counter until his knuckles went pale. The phone on the wall rang sharp and loud in the empty room. Samuel stared at it for a moment, already knowing it would be bad news. Good news didn't come by phone anymore. He picked up on the 4th ring. "Mr. Washington, this is Atlantic Food Supply. Your account is 60 days past due. We need payment today, or we'll have to suspend deliveries." Samuel closed his eyes. Atlantic had been supplying his restaurant since his mother's time. 15 years he had worked with them, never missing a payment until 6 months ago, when everything started falling apart. "Please," he said, keeping his voice steady, even though his stomach was churning. "Just 1 more week. I've been a customer for 15 years. 15 years, and I've never asked for anything. You know I'm good for it. I just need a little more time." There was silence on the other end. Samuel could hear the woman breathing, could almost feel her weighing the decision. "1 week, Mr. Washington. That's the absolute best I can do. After that, I'll have to cut you off. I'm sorry. I really am." The line went dead before he could thank her. Samuel hung up slowly, his hand lingering on the receiver. 1 week, 7 days. The numbers kept getting smaller, and the debt kept getting bigger. He was running out of time, running out of options, running out of hope. The front door slammed open hard enough to rattle the windows. Vincent Blackwell, the landlord, walked in like he already owned the place. He was a heavy-set white man in his early 50s with a red face and slick-back hair that shone with too much product. A gold ring glittered on his pinky finger, and a Rolex peeked out from under his sleeve. His suit probably cost more than Samuel made in 6 months. A fat cigar hung from his lips, unlit but ever present, like a prop in a movie about rich men who took whatever they wanted. Behind him came Derek and Tony, his 2 bodyguards. Both were tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of cold eyes that made people cross the street. They positioned themselves on either side of the door, arms folded, blocking any thought of escape. Vincent stopped in the middle of the restaurant and looked around slowly, his lip curling with disgust. He ran 1 finger along the edge of a table and examined it like he expected to find dirt. "Samuel Washington," he said, drawing out each syllable. "You owe me 6 months' rent." Samuel straightened his back and stepped out from behind the counter. He would not cower, not in his mother's restaurant. "Mr. Blackwell, I was going to call you this week. I just need a little more time to get the money together. Business has been slow, but it's picking up. I can pay you. I just need time." Vincent cut him off with a laugh, short and ugly like a dog's bark. He took the cigar from his mouth and blew imaginary smoke in Samuel's direction. "Time is money, Samuel, and you don't have either." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. He didn't hand it to Samuel. He tossed it onto the counter between them like throwing scraps to a dog. 30 days. That's all you've got. After that, this place belongs to me. I'm going to tear this dump down and build a shopping center. Progress, Samuel. That's what this neighborhood needs. Real progress. Not some run-down little kitchen serving food nobody wants. Samuel looked at the document but didn't touch it. He could see the number printed at the top. $50,000. The buyout offer for everything his mother had built. "That's more than fair." Vincent continued walking closer. Samuel could smell his cologne now, thick and expensive, mixed with the stale scent of old cigars. 50,000. Take it and walk away clean. Hell, you might even have enough left over to rent yourself a nice little apartment somewhere. Maybe get a job washing dishes at a real restaurant. Derek and Tony laughed from their spots by the door. The sound echoed off the empty walls. Samuel felt something hot rise in his chest. Anger, shame, defiance. He looked at Vincent, at his gold ring, and his smug smile. Then he looked up at his mother's photograph on the wall. Rosa's eyes seemed to meet his calm and steady, the way they always were when things got hard. "Don't you dare give up, Samuel. Don't you dare." He turned back to Vincent. "I'm not selling." The smile faded from Vincent's face like water running off glass. He tilted his head slowly, studying Samuel the way a snake studies a mouse before striking. "You sure about that? Because I don't think you understand your situation here. You've got no money, no customers, no future, and in 30 days, you won't have a roof over your head either." He stepped closer, close enough that Samuel could see the broken blood vessels in his nose. "I'm offering you a way out, a chance to walk away with something instead of nothing. You should take it." Samuel didn't step back. He held his ground even though his heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. "I said no. This restaurant belonged to my mother. She built it from nothing. She fed this whole neighborhood when nobody else would. I made her a promise before she died, and I intend to keep it." Vincent stared at him for a long moment. Then he smiled again, but this time there was no humor in it, just cold, patient malice. "You're going to regret those words, Samuel. I promise you that. 30 days, and then I'm coming back with the sheriff and a demolition crew." He turned and walked toward the door, his expensive shoes clicking against the old wooden floor. Derek and Tony stepped aside to let him pass, then followed him out into the rain. The door swung shut behind them, and the little bell above it rang once a hollow sound in the empty restaurant. Samuel stood alone in the silence. His hands were shaking. He hadn't noticed until now. He looked down at them, these hands that had cooked 10,000 meals, and watched them tremble like leaves in the wind. He walked slowly to the nearest chair and sat down heavily, the weight of everything pressed down on him, and for a moment he couldn't breathe. $47,000, 30 days. A man with money and power and no conscience who wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. Samuel put his head in his hands and closed his eyes. "I'm sorry, Mama," he whispered. "I don't know if I can do this anymore." Outside, the rain kept falling. The neon sign flickered weaker, one of the letters buzzing and sparking before going dark completely. The afternoon light faded toward evening, and still Samuel sat there alone with his thoughts and his fears and his mother's photograph watching over him. He didn't know how long he stayed like that. Minutes, maybe an hour. The light outside had turned gray and dim when the little bell above the door rang again. A man stood in the doorway, old, maybe late 60s, with a scraggly gray beard and wild white hair that looked like it hadn't seen a comb in months. His clothes were torn and filthy, more holes than fabric. His shoes had split open at the toes. He was soaking wet, shivering so hard Samuel could see it from across the room. He smelled like the streets, like rain and sweat and days without a shower, like someone the world had forgotten. The man didn't come inside. He just stood there in the doorway, dripping water onto the floor, looking at Samuel with sunken eyes that held nothing. No hope, no expectation, just a quiet, desperate question that he was too tired or too proud to ask out loud. Samuel looked at this stranger. He thought about Vincent Blackwell and his gold ring and his threats. He thought about the stack of bills in the drawer and the phone call from Atlantic and the 30 days ticking away like a bomb. He thought about his empty restaurant and his empty pockets and all the reasons he should say no. And then he thought about his mother. Samuel stood up. "Come in," he said softly, surprised by the steadiness in his own voice. "Come on in and sit down." The old man's eyes widened slightly, as if those were the last words he expected to hear, as if he had already braced himself for rejection, for disgust, for the door slamming in his face the way it always did. But Samuel just gestured toward the table closest to the kitchen, the warmest spot in the restaurant where the heat from the old stove kept the chill away. "It's cold out there," Samuel said. "You look like you could use something to eat." The old man took one step inside, then another. His wet shoes squeaked against the wooden floor. He moved slowly, carefully, like he was waiting for someone to shout at him to get out, to stop tracking water everywhere, to go back where he came from. Nobody shouted. Samuel watched him lower himself into the chair, his joints creaking, his body folding into the seat, like he might never get up again. Their eyes met across the empty restaurant. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them needed to. Outside, the rain kept falling. And inside Washington's kitchen, something was about to change. Two customers were still at the counter finishing their coffee. Earl and Dottie, a middle-aged couple Tuesday regulars. They had been sitting quietly during Vincent's visit, pretending not to hear. Now they were staring at the old man who had just sat down near the kitchen. The smell reached them first. Days of sweat and rain and sleeping in doorways. Dottie's face twisted. She pressed a napkin over her nose and leaned into her husband, whispering loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Earl, do you smell that? It's making me sick." Earl shifted uncomfortably on his stool, glancing back and forth between the old man and Samuel. "Maybe we should just go, Dottie. I'll get the check." He pulled out his wallet and left some bills on the counter, more than he owed. Dottie was already gathering her purse, holding it close to her chest like a shield. "We'll see you next week, Samuel," Earl said, but his voice was stiff. He didn't look Samuel in the eye. "Maybe." They hurried toward the door, giving the old man's table a wide berth. Dottie muttered something under her breath as they passed. The bell jangled, and they were gone. Through the window, Samuel watched them rush to their car in the rain shoulders, hunched heads down. The old man had watched the whole thing. Now he placed both hands on the table and slowly pushed himself up. "I should go," he said quietly. His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it much lately. "I didn't mean to cause you trouble. You've already lost 2 customers because of me. I can find somewhere else." He was halfway out of the chair, legs unsteady, when Samuel spoke. "Where?" The old man stopped. "What?" "Where will you go? It's pouring out there. Getting colder by the minute." Samuel gestured toward the chair. "Sit down, please." "But your customers will come back or they won't. That's not your problem to worry about." Samuel's voice was gentle but firm. "Right now, you're here. You're wet and cold and hungry. So sit down and let me fix that." The old man hesitated. Something flickered across his face, too quick to read. Then he lowered himself back into the chair. "Thank you," he said. I'm not used to this." The old man gestured vaguely at the restaurant, at Samuel, at the chair beneath him. "Any of it." Samuel nodded like he understood. "I'll be right back." He disappeared into the kitchen. The old man sat very still, hands folded on the table in front of him. His eyes moved slowly around the room, taking in details. The peeling wallpaper, the water-stained ceiling, the photographs covering one wall, showing decades of smiling faces. His gaze stopped on the black and white portrait of Rosa Washington. He studied it for a long moment, head tilted slightly like he was trying to figure something out. The kitchen door swung open, and his expression went neutral again. Samuel set a tray on the table, a bowl of gumbo steam rising thick and fragrant, loaded with shrimp and sausage, a plate of fried chicken golden and crispy, a slice of cornbread with butter melting into it, a tall glass of sweet tea. The old man looked at the food, then up at Samuel. His hand stayed in his lap. "I can't pay for this," he said. "I don't have any money. Haven't had any in a while." Samuel pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. "I didn't ask for money." "Then why you don't know me? I could be anyone. You're someone who needs a hot meal. That's enough for me to know." The old man held his gaze for a moment. There was something searching in his eyes, something that went beyond simple gratitude. Then he reached for the spoon. The first taste of gumbo made him close his eyes. His shoulders dropped, tension releasing. He took another spoonful, then another, eating, slowly savoring it. A single tear escaped down his weathered cheek. He didn't seem to notice. Samuel watched him eat, and a memory surfaced. 45 years ago. This same room, brighter, then everything newer. Samuel was 13 doing homework at a corner table while his mother worked the dinner rush. The front door opened and a man stumbled in. White, middle-aged clothes, torn and stained face bruised. He smelled of alcohol and something worse. He stood in the doorway, swaying, looking around with unfocused eyes. The restaurant went quiet. Forks stopped moving. Conversations died. A woman near the window gathered her children and hurried out, leaving half her meal behind. Two men at the counter exchanged looks and turned their backs. Young Samuel watched from his corner, homework forgotten. He expected his mother to call someone, maybe the police. The man looked dangerous, unpredictable, but Rosa walked straight up to the stranger. She touched his arm, light and brief, and pointed toward the table nearest the kitchen. "Sit down, honey. You look like you've had a rough day." She brought him food, the same food she served everyone else. She refilled his water twice and didn't hover or stare. When he finished, she packed up extra cornbread in a paper bag and pressed it into his hands. "For later," she said, "in case you get hungry tonight." The man left without a word, but at the door, he turned back. He looked at Rosa for a long moment, then nodded once and walked out into the night. Later, while helping his mother clean up, Samuel asked about it. "Mama, weren't you scared of that man?" Rosa was wiping down the counter the same motion she'd made 10,000 times. "Scared of what, baby?" "He looked mean, and he smelled bad." Everyone else was scared. Rosa stopped wiping. She looked at her son, then sat down on the stool next to him. "Samuel, let me tell you something. When a hungry person walks through that door, I don't see mean or scary. I see hungry. That's all." She tapped her finger on the counter. "A full belly can change a lot of things. Can't change everything, but it's a start." She stood up and went back to wiping. Besides, that man didn't need people being scared of him. He's probably got enough of that already. What he needed was some food and someone to treat him like a regular person. That's not so hard to give. Samuel blinked, and he was back in the present. The old man had finished eating. The bowl was empty, the plate picked clean, even the cornbread crumbs were gone. He sat back in his chair, hands resting on the table, looking at Samuel with an expression that was hard to read. "That was the best meal I've had in months," he said. "Maybe years. Thank you." "You're welcome." The old man glanced toward the window. Rain still coming down, hard wind shaking the glass. "I should get going. Find somewhere to settle in for the night before it gets worse out there." "Is there anywhere safe you can wait out the night?" "There's an overpass on 32nd Street. It's dry underneath mostly. I was staying there before they chased everyone out." "They chased you out?" "City cleanup, they called it. Happens every few months. They sweep through, move everyone along, throw away whatever we leave behind. Then we come back, and a few months later they do it again." He shrugged. "It's how it works." Samuel looked at the old man, looked at the rain streaming down the windows, looked at the bench against the back wall, the one his mother used to nap on between the lunch and dinner rush. "I've got a bench back there," he said. "It's not much. Hard wood too short to stretch out proper, but it's dry and warm. I've got a blanket." The old man's eyebrows rose. "You're offering me a place to sleep. For tonight. We can figure out tomorrow when it comes." "You don't know anything about me. I could rob you blind while you're sleeping." Samuel smiled slightly. "Not much to rob. Besides, you don't strike me as the type." "How would you know what type I am?" "I wouldn't. But my mother used to say you can tell a lot about a person by how they eat. Someone who savors their food like you just did someone who cleans their plate out of gratitude instead of greed." Samuel shrugged. "That's not a thief. That's just someone who's been hungry too long." The old man was quiet for a moment. That searching look was back in his eyes, more intense now. "Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was. This was her place. She built it from nothing." "Is she still around?" "Passed away 8 years ago, but sometimes I still feel like she's watching." Samuel glanced up at the photograph on the wall, making sure I don't mess things up too badly. The old man followed his gaze to the portrait. He studied it again longer this time. "She looks kind," he said finally. "You can see it in her eyes." Samuel nodded. "She was. Kindest person I ever knew." He stood up and walked to the closet near the back of the restaurant. He pulled out a wool blanket, old and faded, but clean, and carried it to the bench. "It gets cold in here at night. The heating's not what it used to be." He spread the blanket out. "But this should help." The old man rose slowly from the table. He crossed the room and stood looking down at the bench, at the blanket, at Samuel. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "I really don't. People don't. This doesn't happen. Not to people like me. You don't have to thank me. Just get some rest." The old man lowered himself onto the bench. The wood creaked under his weight. He pulled the blanket up to his chest and lay back, staring at the ceiling. Samuel turned off the lights one by one. The restaurant fell into darkness, lit only by the faint red glow of the neon sign filtering through the rain-streaked windows. "Good night." "Good night, Samuel." Samuel disappeared through the door that led to the small apartment upstairs. His footsteps creaked on the old stairs, then went silent. Marcus lay on the bench, eyes open in the darkness. He didn't move for a long time, just lay there looking at the shadows on the ceiling, listening to the rain, thinking. After a while, he turned his head and looked around the room. The stack of bills on the counter edges visible in the dim light. The photograph of Rosa Washington, her kind eyes watching over the empty restaurant. The kitchen door. The front entrance with its sad little bell. He closed his eyes. But he didn't sleep. Not yet. His mind was working, turning things over, making calculations. Outside, the rain kept falling. The neon sign flickered once, twice, then held steady. Morning light crept through the windows of Washington's kitchen. Samuel had been up since 5, moving quietly around the kitchen, the familiar rhythm of cooking settling his nerves after a restless night. When he came out with 2 plates of breakfast, Marcus was already awake. The old man had folded the blanket neatly and placed it on the end of the bench. He sat in the corner, hands in his lap, watching Samuel with those quiet, observant eyes. "Didn't expect you to be up this early," Samuel said, setting down the plates. Grits with butter-fried eggs, crispy bacon, and 2 cups of hot coffee. "Old habit," Marcus said. "Hard to sleep past dawn when you've spent enough nights outside." They ate in comfortable silence. Samuel noticed Marcus glancing around the restaurant as he chewed, his gaze lingering on certain things. The cash register, the stack of papers beside it, the way Samuel's jaw tightened every time he looked toward the counter. After breakfast, Samuel walked to the register and opened it. Marcus watched from his seat as Samuel counted the bills inside. It didn't take long. There wasn't much to count. Samuel's shoulders sagged slightly. He pulled a folded paper from the stack, looked at it, then shoved it into the drawer beneath the counter. His hand stayed there for a moment, pressing down on the drawer like he was trying to keep something buried. The front door opened, bell jingling. A heavyset black woman in her 60s bustled in, shaking rain off her umbrella. Linda from the grocery store next door. She was already talking before she fully stepped inside. "Samuel Washington, I saw that man sleeping in here last night through the window. You know I don't like to gossip, but people are talking, and I thought you should know what they're saying about—" She stopped mid-sentence, spotting Marcus at the corner table. Her eyes went wide. "Lord have mercy, he's still here." "Good morning, Linda," Samuel said calmly. "Good morning, nothing, Samuel, have you lost your mind?" Linda lowered her voice, though not nearly enough. "You're letting homeless people sleep in your restaurant now. What about health codes? What about your customers?" "He needed a place to stay. I had a place. Simple as that." Linda threw her hands up. "Simple, nothing about this is simple. Vincent Blackwell has been circling you like a vulture for months. You're barely keeping this place open. And now, you're taking in strays." She shook her head vigorously. "You're too good for your own good, Samuel. That's always been your problem. Too good until it makes you stupid." Samuel just smiled. "Appreciate your concern, Linda. You want some coffee?" Linda opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. She looked at Marcus again, then back at Samuel. "I'll pray for you," she said finally, "because you're going to need it." She left the door swinging shut behind her. Through the window, Samuel could see her hurrying back to her store, probably already preparing to tell everyone what she'd seen. Marcus spoke from his corner. "She's not wrong, you know, about me causing you trouble. Linda means well. She just worries too loud. Still, if my being here makes things harder for you, it doesn't." The conversation ended there. Samuel went back to preparing for the day, though they both knew there wouldn't be many customers. At 10 o'clock, the lights went out. The refrigerator's hum died. The ceiling fan slowed to a stop. The restaurant fell into sudden, heavy silence. Samuel stood frozen for a moment, then walked to the light switch and flipped it. Nothing. He tried another. Nothing. He picked up the phone and dialed the electric company. Marcus watched from his table as Samuel spoke, his voice calm at first, then confused, then tight, with controlled frustration. "What do you mean, administrative issues? I've been paying what I can. Late sometimes, partial sometimes, but I've been paying—" A pause. "Wrong information about the contract holder. That's impossible. This has been in my name for 30 years. Another pause, longer this time. How long until it's resolved? You can't give me an estimate. He hung up slowly. For a long moment, he just stood there, hands still on the phone, staring at nothing. What happened? Marcus asked. They say there's a problem with my account. Wrong information in the system. They have to verify everything before they can turn it back on. Samuel's voice was flat. Could take days. Could take weeks. They don't know. He didn't need to explain what this meant. No electricity meant no refrigeration, no lights, no cooking on the electric stove, no business. The front door opened. Vincent Blackwell walked in, silhouetted against the gray daylight. He looked around the dark restaurant with exaggerated surprise. My goodness, Samuel, it's dark as a cave in here. Is something wrong? Samuel's hands curled into fists at his sides. You know exactly what's wrong. Me. Vincent pressed a hand to his chest in mock innocence. I'm just a concerned landlord checking on my property, making sure everything is in order. His eyes swept the room and landed on Marcus, still sitting in the corner. His lip curled. I see you're still keeping your pet homeless man. Doesn't he have somewhere else to be? A shelter? A street corner? Marcus didn't react, just sat there watching Vincent with those quiet eyes. Samuel stepped forward. Get out of my restaurant. Your restaurant, Vincent laughed. For how much longer? Samuel, 25 days now. Isn't it less than a month until this dump belongs to me? He glanced at Marcus again. You and your friend here will be out on the street together. Maybe he can teach you how to sleep under a bridge. I said get out. Vincent held up his hands in mock surrender, still smiling. I'm going. Just wanted to see how you're holding up. He paused at the door. Not well, it seems. Such a shame. He left. The bell above the door rang cheerful and hollow. Samuel stood in the middle of his dark restaurant, breathing hard. His hands were shaking. He unclenched them slowly, deliberately, and walked to the nearest chair. He sat down heavily. Marcus rose from his corner and approached. He moved slowly, giving Samuel space, and settled into the chair across from him. How long has he been doing this? Marcus asked quietly. Samuel looked up. 3 months, maybe 4. He wants this whole block. Going to tear it all down and build some shopping center. Everyone else already sold. I'm the last one. Why didn't you sell? Samuel's eyes drifted to his mother's photograph on the wall. This was my mother's place. She built it 40 years ago with nothing but her own 2 hands and a loan she spent 15 years paying off. She fed this whole neighborhood when nobody else would, gave meals to people who couldn't pay, gave jobs to people nobody else would hire. He paused. Before she died, I promised her I'd keep it going. And you've kept that promise. I've tried. Samuel's voice was heavy. She used to say that when you have bread, you share it with someone who has none. I've tried to live that way. Maybe Linda's right. Maybe it's made me stupid. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, or maybe it's made you the kind of person worth knowing. Samuel looked at him surprised. Your mother sounds like she was an extraordinary woman, Marcus continued, and it sounds like she raised an extraordinary son. Samuel didn't know what to say to that. He just nodded and looked away, blinking hard. They sat together in the dark restaurant for a while, not speaking. Outside, the rain started up again. That night, after Samuel had gone upstairs to his small apartment, Marcus lay on the bench in the darkness. He waited until he heard the floorboards above creak and settle until he was sure Samuel was asleep. Then he rose silently and slipped out the back door. The alley behind the restaurant was empty, lit only by a distant streetlight. Marcus reached into the inner pocket of his ragged coat and pulled out a smartphone. New model, expensive, completely at odds with his appearance. He dialed a number from memory and lifted the phone to his ear. Harrison, he said when the call connected. His voice had changed completely. Gone was the hesitant, weary tone of a homeless man. In its place was something cold, sharp, commanding. I need everything you can find on Vincent Blackwell, Baltimore area. All his real estate transactions for the past 5 years, business partners, financial records, everything. A pause as he listened to the response. I don't care how long it takes. Get it done. Another pause. And Harrison, this one's personal. Don't disappoint me. He ended the call and stood for a moment in the dark alley, looking back at the restaurant. The neon sign was dark now, no power to make it flicker. The building looked tired, defeated, but Marcus's eyes held something different, something that looked almost like hope. He slipped the phone back into his coat, went inside, and lay down on the bench as if he had never left. The water stopped working on a Tuesday morning. Samuel turned the faucet in the kitchen, and nothing came out. He tried the bathroom sink, the toilet. all dry. He stood there for a moment, hand still on the tap processing. Then he picked up the phone and called the water company. The conversation went almost exactly like the one with the electric company. Administrative issues, problems with the account information. They would need to verify everything before service could be restored. No timeline, no guarantees. Samuel hung up and stared at the wall. 2 utilities, same story. This wasn't bad luck. This was Vincent Blackwell pulling strings, calling in favors, slowly strangling Washington's kitchen until it had no choice but to die. There was a public water spigot 3 blocks away in the small park near the old community center. Samuel found 2 large buckets in the storage closet and started walking. Marcus watched him go. When Samuel returned 20 minutes later, sweat streaming down his face, despite the cool morning arms straining under the weight of the full buckets, Marcus stood up. "Let me help you carry those." "No need." Samuel set the buckets down carefully, trying not to spill. "I can manage." "I know you can, but you shouldn't have to." Samuel shook his head. "You're a guest here, Marcus. I'm not going to put you to work." Marcus sat back down, but his eyes followed Samuel as the older man made trip after trip to the park. 5 times, 6 times, each journey taking a little longer than the last. By the end of the morning, Samuel was limping slightly, his back clearly aching. He never complained. Not once. The restaurant stayed open even without electricity, even without running water. Samuel cooked on the old gas stove that his mother had never gotten around to replacing. He boiled water for washing dishes. He served whatever he could manage with what he had. A handful of loyal customers still came eating by candlelight, pretending everything was normal. But everything was not normal, and it was about to get worse. A week after the water was cut, Derek and Tony came back. It was the middle of the lunch rush, such as it was. 4 customers sat at various tables eating quietly. Marcus was in his usual corner. Samuel was behind the counter when the door opened and Vincent's 2 bodyguards walked in. They didn't look at Samuel, didn't acknowledge anyone, just sat down at a table near the window and waited. Samuel approached them cautiously. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Derek looked up with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "2 specials. Whatever you've got today." Samuel hesitated, then nodded. He went to the kitchen and prepared 2 plates of chicken and rice, the best he could do with his limited supplies. He brought them out and set them on the table. Derek and Tony ate slowly, deliberately making a show of it. They talked loudly about nothing, laughed at jokes that weren't funny, made the other customers uncomfortable. One by one, the other diners paid their bills and left casting nervous glances over their shoulders. When they finished eating, Derek stood up and stretched. Tony followed. They walked toward the door without looking back. "Hey," Samuel called out. "You didn't pay." Derek stopped, turned around slowly. "Pay for that garbage." He made a face. "That was the worst meal I've ever had. You should be paying me for having to choke it down. You ate every bite. Didn't want to hurt your feelings." Derek smiled. "Tell you what, we'll call it even. You don't charge us, and I won't report you to the health department for running a restaurant with no water. Deal." He didn't wait for an answer. He kicked over a chair as he passed it, sending it clattering to the floor. Tony swept his arm across an empty table, knocking glasses and silverware to the ground. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the restaurant. Samuel moved toward them. "Get out. Now." Derek spun around and shoved him hard. Samuel stumbled backward, hit the counter, and fell. Before he could get up, Tony was there, driving a kick into his ribs. The pain was sharp and immediate, stealing his breath. They left, laughing, the door swinging shut behind them. Samuel lay on the floor, one hand pressed against his side, gasping. The restaurant was empty now, except for Marcus, who was already crossing the room. Marcus knelt beside him. His hands were steady as he helped Samuel sit up stronger than they should have been for a man his age and condition. "Are you all right?" Samuel nodded, though his face was tight with pain. "I'll be fine. This isn't the first time. They've done this before. Different men. Same result." Samuel slowly got to his feet, leaning on Marcus for support. "Vincent sends them every few weeks. Reminds me what happens to people who don't cooperate." "You should call the police." Samuel laughed, but there was no humor in it. "And tell them what? That a black man in the poorest neighborhood in Baltimore got pushed around by some white guys in suits. You think they're going to care?" He shook his head. "Vincent has money. Money buys a lot of things in this city, including silence." Marcus helped him to a chair. Samuel sat down heavily, wincing as his ribs protested. "This is wrong," Marcus said quietly. what he's doing to you. It's wrong. Wrong doesn't matter much when you can't afford a lawyer. Marcus didn't respond, but something shifted in his expression, something that looked like resolve. The following week was the worst yet. Customers stopped coming almost entirely. Word had spread that Vincent Blackwell had his eye on Washington's kitchen, and nobody wanted to be caught in the crossfire. The few regulars who still came did so furtively, apologetically. "I'm sorry, Samuel," one elderly woman whispered as she paid for her meal. "They came to my house, Blackwell's people. They told me if I kept coming here, they'd make trouble for my grandson at his job. I can't." She trailed off, tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry." Samuel just nodded and squeezed her hand. "It's all right, Mrs. Patterson. You take care of your family. That's what matters." She left, and she didn't come back. By the end of the third week, there were days when only 2 or 3 customers came. Samuel's supplies dwindled. He couldn't afford to restock. The cash register held barely enough to buy rice and eggs, but every morning he still made breakfast for Marcus. Whatever he had, he split it in half. "You shouldn't be feeding me," Marcus said one morning, looking down at his plate of rice porridge. "You can barely feed yourself." "You're hungrier than I am," Samuel said simply. "I have a roof over my head. You don't. As long as I have food, you eat." Marcus stared at him for a long moment. Then he picked up his spoon and ate without another word. 3 weeks and 4 days after Vincent's ultimatum, Samuel sat alone in his dark restaurant in the middle of the night. A single candle burned on the table in front of him, casting flickering shadows on the walls. The flame reflected in his mother's photograph, making her eyes seem alive. "Mama," he whispered, I tried so hard, but I don't know how much longer I can hold on." His voice broke. Tears rolled down his cheeks, disappearing into the gray stubble on his chin. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I promised you I'd keep this place going, and I failed. I failed you." He put his head down on the table and wept. His shoulders shook. The sound of his crying filled the empty restaurant, raw and broken. He didn't see Marcus watching from the bench in the corner, eyes open in the darkness. He didn't see the look on the old man's face, the mixture of sorrow and determination. The next 3 days blurred together. Morning by morning, Samuel opened the door anyway. Night by night, the candle burned lower, and Marcus watched silent, unreadable, like a man counting down to something. Samuel woke at 4 in the morning on day 28. He hadn't really slept, just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence, waiting for dawn. He got up slowly, his body aching in a dozen places. The bruise on his ribs had faded to yellow, but still hurt when he breathed too deep. His back was stiff from carrying water buckets. His hands were raw from washing dishes in cold water. He went downstairs in the dark, moving by memory through the restaurant he had known his entire life. He didn't need lights. He could navigate this place blind. He sat at a table near the window and watched the street outside slowly brighten. The neon sign hung dark and lifeless above the door. The buckets he used to haul water sat in a row by the kitchen. His mother's photograph watched over everything from its place on the wall. 40 years of memories lived in these walls. His mother teaching him to make gumbo when he was 8. His first time working the register at 12. The pride in her eyes when she handed him the keys after she got too sick to work. The promise he made at her bedside, holding her thin hand as she slipped away. "I'll take care of it, Mama. I won't let it go." He had tried. God, he had tried. At 5 o'clock, he went to the kitchen and lit the gas stove. He had just enough ingredients for one last pot of gumbo. He took his time with it, doing everything exactly the way his mother had taught him. The holy trinity of onions, celery, and bell pepper. The roux stirred slowly until it turned the color of chocolate. The spices measured by feel and smell and 40 years of practice. The restaurant filled with the rich, familiar aroma. Samuel closed his eyes and breathed it in. Whatever happened today, he would go out the same way he had lived, cooking, feeding people, being who his mother raised him to be. Marcus came down at 6 earlier than usual. He had folded his blanket neatly as always, but something was different about him this morning. He stood straighter. His eyes were brighter, more alert. He looked like a man who knew something. Samuel set a bowl of gumbo in front of him. "Might be the last one I ever make in this kitchen." Marcus looked at the bowl, then up at Samuel. "Do you regret it?" "Regret what?" "Any of it. The meals you gave away. The people you helped. If you had saved that money instead, maybe you could have paid Blackwell. Maybe you could have kept this place." Samuel sat down across from him. He thought about the question for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "Not for 1 second. Even now, even knowing you're about to lose everything. What's everything? Samuel gestured around the restaurant. These walls, this stove, they're just things. They matter because of what they represent. What my mother built here wasn't a building. It was an idea. The idea that you help people when they need help, that you feed the hungry, that you treat everyone who walks through your door like they deserve to be there. He shook his head. If I had turned people away just to save money, I would have lost this place a long time ago. It just would have taken longer to notice. Marcus nodded slowly. You're a rare man, Samuel Washington. I'm just my mother's son. They ate together in silence as the morning brightened outside. At 10 o'clock, a car pulled up in front of the restaurant. Then another. Samuel heard the doors slam and knew without looking what was coming. 2 police officers walked through the front door. One was tall and white with a red face. The other was shorter black and wouldn't meet Samuel's eyes. Mr. Washington, the tall one said. He held up a document. I'm Officer Johnson. This is Officer Miller. We're here to execute a court-ordered eviction. You have 2 hours to collect your personal belongings. Samuel stood very still. Eviction? I never received any notice. Johnson consulted his paperwork. According to court records, 3 notices were sent to this address over the past 4 months. All were returned as undeliverable. That's impossible. I've been here every day. I never saw any notices. Miller finally looked up. His expression was uncomfortable, almost apologetic. I'm sorry, sir. We're just following orders. The court has ruled and we have to enforce it. Through the window, Samuel saw another car arrive, a black Mercedes. Vincent Blackwell stepped out, grinning widely. Derek and Tony climbed out of a second car and stood behind him, like attack dogs waiting for a command. Vincent pushed through the front door, arms spread wide. Samuel, what a beautiful morning, isn't it? The sun is shining, the birds are singing, and justice is being served. Samuel's hands clenched at his sides. You intercepted my mail. You made sure I never saw those notices. Me. Vincent pressed a hand to his chest. I would never do something so underhanded. Maybe you should hire a more reliable mailman. Outside, a crowd was gathering. Neighbors, shopkeepers, people from the community. They stood on the sidewalk watching through the windows. Samuel could hear their murmured conversations. Knew this was coming. Shame about Sam. Good man. Should have just sold when he had the chance. That's what happens when you're too stubborn to know when you've lost. Linda from the grocery store pushed to the front of the crowd. Her face was a mixture of pity and vindication. I told him, she said to anyone who would listen. I told him he was being foolish. But did he listen? No. Johnson stepped forward. Mr. Washington, I need you to come with us. Peacefully, please. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Samuel took a step back. His shoulders touched the wall. He was standing directly beneath his mother's photograph. No. Johnson sighed. Sir, please. I don't want to arrest you. Then don't. Samuel's voice was steady. I'm not leaving. My mother built this restaurant with her bare hands. She spent 40 years here. I spent my whole life here. I won't walk out like I have something to be ashamed of. Vincent laughed from the doorway. This is pathetic. Just drag him out already. We don't have the authority to physically remove, Miller began. Then I'll do it myself. Vincent snapped his fingers. Derek, Tony. The 2 bodyguards moved forward, pushing past the officers. They grabbed Samuel by the arms, one on each side, and yanked him away from the wall. Samuel struggled, but he was 58 years old, with bruised ribs and 3 weeks of exhaustion weighing him down. They dragged him toward the door, his feet scraping against the wooden floor. Wait. Samuel reached back toward the photograph on the wall. Please, just let me take her picture. Please. Derek laughed. Grab it yourself, old man. Oh, wait, you can't. They were almost to the door now. Samuel could see the crowd outside their faces, a blur of pity and judgment. He could see Vincent grinning like a man who had won the lottery. Mama, Samuel gasped, still reaching for the photograph. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Stop. The word wasn't loud, but something in it made everyone freeze. Marcus rose from his chair in the corner. He had been so still, so quiet, that everyone had forgotten he was there. Now he walked toward the center of the room with a stride that didn't match his ragged clothes or weathered face. Vincent turned, sneering. What do you want, old man, looking for a handout? Maybe Samuel can share his cardboard box with you. Marcus stopped in front of Vincent. He was taller than he had seemed before, straighter. His eyes, which had always appeared tired and defeated, now held something else entirely. Let him go, Marcus said calmly. Or what? Vincent laughed. You'll smell me to death. Or I'll make you wish you had." Before Vincent could respond, the sound of engines filled the street outside. Loud, powerful engines, multiple vehicles. Everyone turned to look. 5 black SUVs had pulled up in front of the restaurant, blocking the street. Their doors opened in unison, and men in expensive suits stepped out. Each one carried a leather briefcase. Each one moved with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly how much power they held. Vincent's smile faltered. "What the hell is this?" Marcus turned to face him, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed completely. Gone was the hesitant rasp of a homeless man. In its place was something cold, sharp, and absolutely commanding. "That," Marcus said, "is my legal team." He looked at Samuel, still held between Derek and Tony, then back at Vincent, whose face had gone pale. "Now, Mr. Blackwell, we're going to have a real conversation, and I promise you it's not going to go the way you planned." The 5 black SUVs sat in a perfect line, engines idling, blocking the entire street. The men in suits stood beside them like statues waiting. Derek and Tony still had their hands on Samuel's arms, but their grip had loosened. They were staring at the vehicles, at the men at Marcus, trying to understand what was happening. Vincent found his voice first. "This is ridiculous. I don't know who you think you are, old man, but you can't just—" "James." Marcus didn't raise his voice, but one of the suited men immediately stepped forward, carrying a garment bag. 5 minutes. Marcus walked to the nearest SUV and climbed inside. The door closed behind him. The crowd on the sidewalk murmured. Vincent shifted his weight from foot to foot, trying to maintain his confident sneer, but failing. The 2 police officers exchanged uncertain glances. Nobody moved. Exactly 5 minutes later, the SUV door opened. The man who stepped out was not the same man who had gone in. Gone were the ragged clothes, the tangled beard, the hunched posture. In their place stood a figure in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. His face was clean-shaven, revealing sharp cheekbones and a strong jaw. His white hair was combed back neatly. His shoes gleamed, but it was his eyes that had changed the most. No longer tired or defeated. Now they held the cold, calculating gaze of a man who had built empires and destroyed rivals without losing sleep. Vincent's face went pale. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Allow me to introduce myself properly," Marcus said, his voice carrying across the silent street. "Marcus Green, chairman of Green Enterprises." The name hit Vincent like a physical blow. He took a step backward, nearly tripping over his own feet. Green Enterprises, one of the largest real estate development corporations on the East Coast, nearly $5 billion in assets. The kind of company that could buy and sell Vincent Blackwell's entire operation without noticing the expense. That's impossible," Vincent stammered. "You were sleeping on a bench. You were eating scraps. You smelled like a homeless man." Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Yes, that was rather the point." A tall black man in a gray suit stepped forward, briefcase in hand. Harrison, Marcus's chief attorney. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had never lost a case and didn't intend to start now. "Mr. Blackwell," Harrison said, opening his briefcase and withdrawing a thick folder, "I represent Mr. Green and Green Enterprises. Over the past 4 weeks, we have conducted a thorough investigation into your business practices in the Baltimore area." He began laying documents on the nearest table one by one. "Coercion of local business owners, intimidation through hired associates, deliberate interference with utility services through bribery of municipal employees." Harrison's voice was calm, almost pleasant. "Tax evasion spanning 7 years, money laundering through shell corporations, fraudulent property transfers." Vincent's face had gone from pale to gray. "You can't prove any of that." "Actually, we can. And we have." Harrison closed the folder. "This morning, copies of all relevant documentation were delivered to the Baltimore field office of the FBI. Special Agent Morrison was quite interested. I believe you'll be hearing from him soon." "You're bluffing." But Vincent's voice cracked on the word. "I don't bluff, Mr. Blackwell. It's inefficient." During this exchange, Samuel had remained on the floor where Derek and Tony had dropped him. He sat there staring at Marcus, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The homeless man he had fed, the stranger he had given a blanket and a place to sleep. The quiet presence who had sat in the corner of his restaurant for nearly a month, eating his food, watching him struggle. A billionaire, the whole time. Marcus walked over and extended his hand. "Let me help you up, Samuel." Samuel took the hand and rose slowly to his feet. His ribs ached. His head was spinning. I don't understand. Why would you do this? We'll talk about that soon. But first, Marcus turned back to Vincent. We have some business to conclude. Harrison produced another set of documents. As of 9 o'clock this morning, Green Enterprises has completed the acquisition of all properties in a 6-block radius surrounding this location. Every building Mr. Blackwell was attempting to purchase is now owned by our corporation. Vincent made a strangled sound. You can't do that. Those deals were already in progress. I had agreements. You had nothing. Marcus's voice was ice. You had intimidation and threats and dirty money. That's not the same as ownership. He stepped closer to Vincent, and despite being older, despite having spent a month living as a vagrant, there was something in his presence that made the younger man shrink back. You wanted to build a shopping center here, fine. I'll build one. But not you. Never you. He gestured toward the restaurant. And this place stays exactly where it is. Washington's Kitchen isn't going anywhere. Vincent's face contorted with rage. This isn't over. I'll sue. I'll take this to court. You'll what? Marcus cut him off. Hire lawyers. I have more lawyers than you have dollars. Take me to court. I own judges you've never even heard of. He leaned in close. Go home, Blackwell. Pack a bag. Get your affairs in order. Because when the FBI comes knocking, and they will, you're going to need every minute you have left. Vincent stood frozen for a long moment. His face cycled through emotions, anger, fear, disbelief, and finally defeat. His shoulders slumped. He turned and walked toward his car without another word. At the door of his Mercedes, he stopped. This isn't over, he said again, but his voice had no conviction in it. Yes, Marcus replied. It is. Vincent got in his car and drove away. Derek and Tony, suddenly finding themselves without an employer, followed in the second vehicle. Officers Johnson and Miller looked at each other. Johnson cleared his throat. I think there may have been some procedural issues with this eviction order. We should probably review the paperwork back at the station. Good idea, Miller agreed quickly. They left without looking back. The crowd on the sidewalk remained still watching, still trying to understand what they had just witnessed. Linda stood at the front, her mouth hanging open. Marcus turned to Samuel. Shall we go inside? I think we have a lot to talk about. Samuel nodded slowly, still dazed. They walked into the restaurant together, leaving the crowd to their whispers. Inside, away from watching eyes, Samuel sank into a chair. His hands were trembling. He looked up at Marcus, still struggling to reconcile the man in the expensive suit with the ragged stranger he had shared meals with. I don't understand, he said again. Any of this. Who are you? Why were you pretending to be homeless? Why did you stay here for a month watching me lose everything? Marcus sat down across from him, the same seat he had occupied for nearly 4 weeks. He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words. I wasn't just watching you lose everything, Samuel. I was watching you hold on to what mattered. He reached into his jacket and produced a folder, which he laid on the table. These are the ownership documents for this building and the land it sits on. I've paid off all your debts, every bill, every back payment, everything you owed. As of today, Washington's Kitchen belongs to you free and clear. Samuel stared at the folder like it might bite him. I can't accept this. It's too much. I didn't do anything to deserve. You didn't do anything. Marcus leaned forward. Samuel, I came into your restaurant 4 weeks ago looking like something the gutter rejected. I smelled. I had nothing. I couldn't pay. And what did you do? Samuel was silent. You fed me. You gave me your best table, the warm one by the kitchen. When other customers complained, you defended me. When they left, you didn't blame me. You gave me a place to sleep when you could barely afford to feed yourself. Marcus shook his head slowly. For 4 weeks, I watched you struggle. I watched Vincent Blackwell cut your power, your water. I watched his thugs beat you. I watched your customers disappear. And through all of it, you still shared whatever you had with me. When you were down to rice and eggs, you gave me half. His voice softened. Do you know how rare that is? In 20 years of searching, I've found exactly 5 people willing to give when they had nothing left to give. You're one of them, and you're the one who gave the most while having the least. Samuel's eyes were wet. I just did what my mother would have done. I know, and that's why you deserve this. Marcus pushed the folder closer. Take it, please, not as charity, as recognition of the kind of person you are. Samuel's hand moved slowly toward the folder. He touched it, then pulled back. It doesn't feel right. taking money I didn't earn. You earned it every day you kept that door open, every meal you served to someone who couldn't pay, every time you chose kindness over profit." Marcus smiled, and for the first time since his transformation, it reached his eyes. "Your mother would be proud of you, Samuel. I never met her, but I'm certain of that." Samuel looked up at the photograph of Rosa on the wall. The tears spilled over, running down his weathered cheeks. "She was everything," he said quietly. "Everything I am is because of her. Then let's honor her legacy together." Samuel wiped his eyes and looked at the folder again. This time he opened it. The restaurant was almost empty now, except for the two of them. The crowd outside had dispersed, though Samuel knew the gossip would spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. By tomorrow, everyone within 10 blocks would know what had happened at Washington's Kitchen. He sat across from Marcus, the ownership documents spread on the table between them. His mind was still reeling, but one question burned brighter than all the others. "I need to know," Samuel said. "Why not just why me? Why any of this? Why does a man worth billions spend his time pretending to be homeless?" Marcus leaned back in his chair. The expensive suit looked strange on him now that Samuel knew what lay beneath it. He had grown used to the ragged coat, the tangled hair, the tired eyes. 40 years ago, Marcus began, I was exactly what you thought I was. Homeless, broke, hopeless. Samuel listened. I was 27, had a small business, a partner I trusted, a wife I loved. Then I found out my partner had been stealing from the company for years. By the time I discovered it, we were bankrupt. He disappeared with what was left of the money. My wife filed for divorce a month later. Marcus's voice was flat, reciting facts he had long since made peace with. Within 6 months, I lost everything. My home, my car, my friends. Nobody wants to know you when you have nothing to offer. He paused, looking at something Samuel couldn't see. I spent 6 months on the streets, sleeping in parks, eating from dumpsters, learning what it feels like when people look right through you like you don't exist. His jaw tightened. One winter night, it was snowing hard. I found a bench in a small park and lay down. I was so cold I couldn't feel my hands or feet, and I remember thinking very clearly that I could just close my eyes and never open them again, and that would be fine. That would be a relief. Samuel's chest ached. He knew that feeling, had come close to it himself in the darkest moments of the past few weeks. But I didn't die, Marcus continued, because a woman found me. A black woman older, coming home from a night shift cleaning offices downtown. She saw me lying there in the snow, and she stopped. She shook me awake, helped me stand, and walked me to her house. His voice changed, grew softer. It was a small house, nothing fancy. She lived alone, didn't have much, but she made me a bowl of hot soup, gave me blankets, let me sleep on her couch. In the morning, she made breakfast and told me I could stay until I got back on my feet. I asked her why. Why she would help a stranger, a white man. She didn't know someone who could have been dangerous. Marcus's eyes met Samuel's. You know what she said? Samuel shook his head. She said, "You're hungry. I have food. You're cold. I have blankets. That's enough reason for me." The words hung in the air. Samuel felt a chill run down his spine. I stayed with her for 3 months. She helped me find a job washing dishes at a restaurant downtown. She encouraged me when I wanted to give up. She believed in me when I had stopped believing in myself. Marcus's voice cracked slightly. She saved my life, not just my body, my soul. What happened to her? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I worked my way up, started another business, a small one. Got lucky a few times, made smart decisions. Within 10 years, I was a millionaire. Within 20, a billionaire. He spread his hands. Everything I have, I built from nothing. But I never forgot where I started. And I never forgot her. 20 years after that night in the snow, I went back to find her. I wanted to thank her. I wanted to give her everything she had given me, multiplied 1,000 times. His voice dropped, but she had died 2 years earlier. Cancer. I missed her by 2 years. Samuel closed his eyes. I'm sorry. I never got to thank her. Never got to tell her what her kindness meant. Never got to show her what I had become because of her. Marcus's hands clenched on the table. I swore that day that I would spend the rest of my life finding people like her. People who give when they have nothing. People who help strangers without expecting anything in return. So that's what you do. Pretend to be homeless and see who helps you. Once a year, 1 month at a time. I've been doing it for 20 years. Marcus smiled sadly. Most people don't even see me. They walk past like I'm invisible. Some give me spare change without looking at my face. A few are kind, but their kindness has limits. They'll buy me a sandwich, but they won't sit with me while I eat it." He looked at Samuel. "In 20 years, I've found 5 people who treated me like a human being. 5 people who gave without counting the cost. You're the 5th, and you're the only one who kept giving even when you were losing everything, even when helping me made things harder for you." Samuel didn't know what to say. He looked down at the documents on the table, then back at Marcus. It was just food, a blanket, nothing special. It was everything. Marcus reached across the table and gripped Samuel's hand. "Don't you see? To you it was nothing special. That's what makes it special. You didn't think twice. You just saw someone who needed help, and you helped. That's the rarest thing in the world." They sat in silence for a while. Outside, the afternoon sun had broken through the clouds, casting warm light through the windows of Washington's kitchen. Finally, Marcus spoke again. "I have a proposal for you, Samuel. Not charity, not a handout, a business partnership." Samuel raised an eyebrow. "I want to invest in this restaurant, expand it, open new locations across Baltimore, maybe beyond, hire more staff, serve more people." Marcus leaned forward. "And I want to create something called the Rosa Meal Program, named after your mother. Every location, every day, 50 free meals for anyone who needs them. Homeless, unemployed, just down on their luck. Anyone who walks through the door hungry walks out fed." Samuel's breath caught. "You want to name it after my mother? She's the one who taught you to be who you are. She deserves the recognition." For a long moment, Samuel couldn't speak. He looked at his mother's photograph, at her kind eyes and gentle smile, and felt something break open in his chest. "I have one condition," he said finally. "Name it. The restaurant keeps its name, Washington's Kitchen, every location, and her picture goes on the wall of every one." Marcus smiled. "I wouldn't have it any other way." They shook hands across the table, not as benefactor and recipient, as partners, as friends. The next morning, Linda appeared at the door. She stood outside for a long moment, visible through the glass, working up the courage to come in. Finally, she pushed through the doorbell, jingling. "Samuel!" She stopped a few feet inside, hands clasped in front of her. Her eyes were red. "I came to apologize for what I said, about you being foolish, about helping that man." She glanced around as if expecting Marcus to appear. "I was wrong. I was so wrong, and I'm sorry." Samuel set down the pot he was carrying and walked over to her. "Linda, you were worried about me. That's not something to apologize for. But I said terrible things. I said you were stupid for helping people. And then it turned out—" She shook her head. "I'm just sorry." Samuel smiled. It was the same smile his mother used to wear, warm and forgiving. "Come sit down, Linda. I'll make you some gumbo. We can talk." She hesitated, then nodded. As she settled into a chair, Samuel went to the kitchen and began to cook. Over the next few days, others came. Neighbors who had watched from the sidewalk. Customers who had stopped coming when Vincent's threats got too scary. One by one, they appeared at the door, awkward and apologetic, and one by one, Samuel welcomed them in. He didn't hold grudges. His mother had never held grudges. What was the point of anger when you could choose kindness instead 1 year later? The neon sign above Washington's Kitchen glowed bright and steady, every letter illuminated. The roof no longer leaked. The walls had been freshly painted, but inside it still smelled the same gumbo, simmering cornbread, baking coffee, brewing strong and hot. Samuel stood behind the counter, same spot he had occupied for 30 years. He was 59 now, his hair a little grayer, his movements a little slower, but his eyes held a peace that hadn't been there a year ago. Through the window, he could see the new shopping center taking shape down the block. Green Enterprises was building it just as Marcus had promised, but Washington's Kitchen stood untouched at its heart, protected by contracts and ownership documents that ensured it would never be torn down. 2 more restaurants had opened in the past year, one in downtown Baltimore, another in the suburbs. Both carried the name Washington's Kitchen. Both had Rosa's photograph on the wall, along with a small plaque that read, "When you have a loaf of bread, share half with someone who is hungrier than you." Both served 50 free meals every day through the Rosa Meal Program. Samuel still worked at the original location. He had hired 15 employees now, many of them people he had helped over the years. Former homeless men and women, single mothers trying to get back on their feet, young people who just needed someone to give them a chance. He trained them the way his mother had trained him, with patience, with kindness, with the understanding that everyone deserves a second chance. The media had discovered the story eventually. Local news at first, then national. Billionaire poses as homeless man discovers angel in Baltimore kitchen. The headlines had been everywhere for a few weeks. Reporters came, asked questions, took pictures. Samuel answered politely, but didn't seek the attention. That wasn't why he did what he did. Vincent Blackwell's story had a different ending. The FBI investigation uncovered years of fraud, bribery, and money laundering. He was arrested in the spring, released on bail, then arrested again when he tried to flee the country. His trial was scheduled for the fall. Derek and Tony, his former bodyguards, were already serving 2-year sentences for assault. Samuel didn't celebrate their downfall. He didn't gloat or feel satisfaction. He just hoped that somehow, somewhere, they might learn what his mother had tried to teach, that there was another way to live. Once a month, Marcus flew in from New York. He never announced his visits, just showed up at the door in jeans and a simple shirt, looking nothing like the chairman of a $5 billion corporation. He would sit at the counter, eat a bowl of gumbo, and talk with Samuel for hours about everything and nothing. They were friends now, real friends, the kind that didn't need contracts or business deals to stay connected. They had found each other in the strangest circumstances, and that bond would last the rest of their lives. On this particular evening, a year and 2 days after the confrontation that had changed everything, Samuel was closing up the restaurant. The last customers had left. The kitchen was clean. The chairs were stacked on the tables. Outside, it was raining. Not a heavy storm, just a steady drizzle that turned the streetlights into fuzzy halos of light. Samuel was wiping down the counter when the bell above the door jingled. He looked up. A young man stood in the doorway. Late 20s, maybe 30. He was soaking wet, his clothes clinging to his thin frame. His right arm ended just below the elbow, the sleeve of his jacket pinned up to accommodate the missing limb. A veteran, probably. The look in his eyes confirmed it, that hollow, 1,000-yard stare of someone who had seen too much and come home to find that home didn't fit anymore. He stood frozen in the doorway, dripping water onto the floor. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there, uncertain whether he was allowed to enter. Samuel set down his rag and walked out from behind the counter. "Come in," he said gently. "Come on in and sit down." The young man blinked, his mouth opened, but no words came out. "It's all right." Samuel gestured toward the table nearest the kitchen, the warmest spot in the restaurant. The same table where Marcus had sat on that first rainy night a year ago. "You look hungry. Let me fix you something to eat." The young man took a hesitant step forward, then another. He was shaking, whether from cold or something else. "I don't," his voice cracked. "I don't have any money. I can't pay." Samuel smiled. It was his mother's smile passed down through the years, warm and unconditional. "I didn't ask for money. Come sit down. Let me take care of you." The young man made it 3 more steps before his legs gave out. He sank into the nearest chair, put his head in his one remaining hand, and began to cry. Deep, wrenching sobs that shook his entire body. Samuel sat down beside him. He didn't say anything. Didn't try to offer comfort with words. He just placed a hand on the young man's shoulder and let him cry. After a while, the sobs subsided. The young man wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, embarrassed. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I don't know why I came in here. I was just walking and I saw the light and—" "You don't have to explain." Samuel stood up. "I'm going to make you some gumbo. Best gumbo in Baltimore. My mother's recipe. You just sit here and rest." He went to the kitchen and began to cook. The familiar motions calmed him as they always did. The chopping, the stirring, the careful attention to spices and timing. Through the window to the dining room, he could see the young man sitting at the table staring at nothing, slowly coming back to himself. When the gumbo was ready, Samuel carried it out on a tray. Gumbo, cornbread, sweet tea. He set it down in front of the young man. "Eat. Take your time. There's more if you want it." The young man looked at the food, then up at Samuel. His eyes were still red, but something had shifted in them. A tiny spark of something that might have been hope. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you." "You're welcome." Samuel sat down across from him. "What's your name?" "David." "I'm Samuel. Welcome to Washington's Kitchen, David." Outside, the rain continued to fall. The neon sign glowed steadily through the darkness, and inside, the smell of gumbo filled the air as another hungry stranger found shelter from the storm. On the wall, Rosa Washington smiled down at them both. The circle of kindness continued unbroken.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.